Segment 3, Golden Black Live. Brian Newbert, Alan Karpik back, and back to talking hoops. And we have put the busiest man on the face, one of the busiest men on the face of the earth, Jerry Palm, this time of year, has been very patient with us, and we appreciate your time. Jerry, welcome to the show. You're not busy at all this time of year at all, are you?
Yeah, too busy to get to Mackey, unfortunately. I haven't been able to get down there yet this year. I don't think I'm going to make it.
Now, where are you this weekend? Where your travels take you, or are you at home?
I'm at home, but I'm just not able to get away to get down there for what's going to be a really big and exciting game, and as always, a fantastic atmosphere.
Yeah, the atmosphere has definitely gotten better. A lot at stake for Purdue. A lot at stake for Maryland too, but are you seeing Purdue kind of? I mean, on your line, we're seeing 5 seed in the tournament. What factors are coming into play from your perspective that could change that maybe on the upside for Purdue? Is it as simple as just winning games?
Well, yeah, and not just winning games, but beating quality teams. And Purdue's schedule is set up nicely for them to make a move up the bracket because they get Maryland at home, they get Wisconsin at home, they have to go to Nebraska in between, but you've got a chance at home to pick up quality wins, and that's how you move up the bracket is by beating quality teams, and Purdue's done that. They've done that at home, and they've done that away from home this year. They'll get, obviously, more chances to pick up quality wins away from home in the conference tournament, which should be pretty well loaded this year and pretty wide open, I would think.
Hey, Jerry, what's Purdue's best win right now?
Michigan State at home is definitely the best win. Winning at Wisconsin, winning at Pittsburgh, those are behind it, but Michigan State is clearly the best team that Purdue's beaten this year.
Purdue gets full credit for winning at Wisconsin, considering Wisconsin was a very different team then as opposed to when it is now, right?
It's the same team,
yeah.
Same guys. They're just playing better now. But, yeah, of course, full credit for winning at Wisconsin.
Right.
On that seed line, and obviously, and you've been watching this for years, it's been interesting to watch the Iowas of the world, to some extent Maryland, some other teams that have, I don't know if we call it the February wall. I don't know if that's what it is. Where, is this as jumbled and maybe as even a tournament as you've ever seen? They talk about 1990 being, and some other years in the past where there have been as much parity, but this seems to be pretty rare in terms of how many teams that are kind of, you're not sure exactly where they are.
Well, if you got to go back to 1990 to find an example of a year like this, then you're talking about something that's pretty rare because that's 26 years ago. I was almost in school.
Yeah,
I wasn't that long out of school then. Yeah, that's the parity at the top of college basketball is what's different this year. When you're trying to do what I do and predict what the committee's going to do and make a bracket and all of that. Typically by this time of year you've got probably 2 number 1 seeds you figure are locked in, and the other 2 spots are up for grabs and probably will be through the conference tournaments. But this year, none of them are locked up. Even Kansas, the overall number 1 in my current bracket, is vulnerable because of the schedule they play. I mean, they're a bad week from being a 2 seed, and it's just like that for everybody this year. And there's nobody that can't be had. There's nobody that's invincible, and there are still 10 teams that could legitimately make a run at a number 1 seed, and one of those will be visiting Mackey Arena this weekend.
One thing that's interesting, you just said that is trying to, with the bracketologist and all the work that you do, how much do you play into, trying to predict what the committee is going to do? Is it all, all based on data? How do you bring that? How do you manage those 2 different situations?
Well, yeah, my brackets are always about trying to predict what the committee would do if the season ended today. So, and that's based, there's data that drives the process, but you have to keep in mind it's a subjective process. So, I have to watch teams play. I have to see what the committee is seeing. It's not possible for me to watch as much as the 10-person committee, but I try and watch as much as I can, teams from all over the country, so I get an idea of what they're like and what the committee might see for the subjective part of the analysis. But then the data, a lot of that is just an attempt to try and predict what the committee will do with this year's team based on what they've done in the past, the kinds of things that they rewarded in the past, the kinds of things that they say are important. And so in a sense, it's kind of behavioral analysis of a sorts to try and figure all of that out. And every year, of course, it's different. And so, it's a very inexact science, and there's a lot of art to it.
Have you been tweaking your bracket every week or rewriting your bracket every week, given all the parity and all the upsets?
Feels like it, right?
Yeah.
My actual schedule for CBS once the football season ends at the beginning of January is to do Monday and Friday brackets.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also want one every time one of my number one seeds loses. So I haven't had a week without at least one extra bracket in it, and sometimes two. And so it feels like I'm rewriting it every day. But it's and now we're getting to the time of year where next week they will become daily updates. But and those will probably be more tweaks than total rewrites. But some days are busier than others.
Being a Purdue graduate, but also growing up, I mean, is this something in your DNA? Were you doing this kind of thing even at age 7 and 8, trying to do these kind of, I mean, you obviously have that type of brain and that type of intelligence to be able to put this together, but did you ever picture this is really what you were going to be part of your life's work?
Didn't everybody want to grow up being the RPI guy?
Yeah, maybe.
The RPI wasn't invented until 1981. I was just getting out of high school then, so I wasn't tracking it as a child. But I always had a head for numbers. When I was a kid, it was baseball.
Yeah.
Baseball stats and things like that. I mean, that was always a big thing back then. But I'm not just a Purdue grad. I was born down there when my parents were in school, so I was a Purdue fan all my life before I ever got to school there. And obviously followed the football team, followed the basketball team. Maybe not from a numeric point of view, but certainly as a fan. But once I figured out, saw the RPI formula, it was pretty natural for me to try and duplicate it and figure out, what it meant and how it was being used. And I was doing it for my own edification and to teach myself some new technology in a way that interested me. And once I shared the information and people got interested, it kind of snowballed.
RPI still, I mean, in terms of, are there any other factors that have come in over the last few years that not certainly hasn't replaced that, but in terms of how much has it changed over time in terms of selection, or has it really not changed that much in terms of really what the committee's looking for?
Well, no, I mean, the criteria is largely the same, and it's looked at the same. It's still an RPI-driven process. Probably the biggest misconception about the RPI is that your own rating is not going to get you in the tournament, and it's not going to get you left out of the tournament, and it's not a decisive thing. They don't ever look at two teams and say, well, one is 35 in the RPI and one's 55, so we're going to take 35. It's not used that way. It's used more as an aggregator. They want to see how you do against the top 25, top 50, top 100, even top 200 teams in the RPI. And so it's used more as a way to categorize teams than to precisely measure them. It's just not sophisticated enough to do that, and nothing really is. There are other metrics out there, some that have been around forever, like Sagarin, and others that are a little newer, like Ken Pomeroy's and stuff, and those don't really have much of an influence on the committee. Some individual committee members will look at those and use it kind of to inform their own thoughts, but they don't get discussed by and large in the committee room, and they aren't any sort of a significant factor. And if all you have is a good rating in Sagarin or something like that, you don't really have anything as far as they're concerned.
Jerry, I have a very important question for you. How come you and your fellow bracketologists hate my favorite team and are so blatantly biased toward my favorite team's rival?
What amuses me is when when Purdue fans get on me. A lot last year. You must hate Purdue and you love Indiana, blah, blah, blah. And last year when, Purdue screwed up the first 2 months of the season, mm-hmm. and, we're almost left for dead. Not quite like Wisconsin this year, but still in bad shape and had to make a really good run through conference play just to get what they ended up with in an 8-9 game after finishing 12-6 in the league. Purdue fans were hard to convince that the non-conference part of your schedule counted, and just having a good conference record wasn't going to get you anything. And this year, that battle is with Wisconsin fans, who you'd think the season started on January 17th
Right.
when they began their 9-game winning streak. And, the previous games still count. But, those are the fans that, typically hate me at the moment. There's really only one fan base that's ever liked me and never turned on me, and that's VCU's. But I've got them out of the bracket right now, so that could change.
That could change. It's all fleeting in the world of Twitter. It definitely is fleeting. Yes, I would say Western Illinois and the Gardner Webbs of the world and North Florida's. Those kind of losses do wreak havoc on teams.
They count. You played them, they count.
That's exactly right. So
you got to do some stuff to make up for it. And last year Purdue did, and this year Wisconsin is doing that, but they had to. Wisconsin's conference performance alone would normally have them in the top 20 of the nation, but that's they're not being judged on only their conference performance, and so they may find themselves in kind of the same boat Purdue was in, which is like an 8-9 game last year.
And about that Purdue team, you've obviously watched them not dispassionately because you obviously have a lot of history there. But what are you seeing in Purdue, maybe from a broad stroke perspective? And again, I know we talked about that fifth seed. They still could get the double bye in the Big Ten tournament. That's possible.
Right.
As well. Wisconsin could help make that happen too. But what are you seeing in the Boilermakers specifically?
I think that Purdue this year, they could win the whole thing, or they could get beat in the first round. And I think they're going to go as far as their guards take them. They're big guys, Hammonds and Haas and Caleb Swanigan and even Vince Edwards, who isn't, I suppose, technically considered a big, but he's pretty big for a small forward. That front line is a matchup nightmare for almost every team Purdue would encounter, but they've got to take care of the basketball. They've got to get some outside shots to fall, and when they do that, they're very difficult to beat. But especially against the better teams and especially away from home, that hasn't necessarily been there for them. The first half at Indiana was a disaster, and of course it didn't help that Hammonds and Haas both had 2 quick fouls, relatively speaking. But when Purdue is struggling, it's because the guards aren't doing their job. They aren't holding up their end of the bargain, and that's a generalization. But if Purdue's guards play well here at the end of the season, a Final Four isn't out of the realm of possibility. And once you get there, anything can happen. But again, one bad day is all it takes, and an 11 seed can beat you.
Jerry, now that most of the regular season has played out, how would you assess Purdue's non-conference schedule from a resume-building perspective?
Not bad. The ranking is in the 120s, so that's not awful. It could be. It's not the kind of schedule that Kansas normally plays, but it's better than they played last year too. And actually, that makes sense. They should have played a better schedule this year because it was a more veteran team. You would want to try and test yourself more. The Florida, getting Florida in the tournament was good. Playing Pittsburgh on the road, I realize that's part of the ACC challenge,
right.
but that's a good team. Vanderbilt is a good team that's disappointed. Probably should have been better than they've been. So they did play some good teams outside the league. Butler, another one that's probably going to make the tournament or at least close to it. That's really for a team like Purdue, you're playing 4 or 5 teams that are tournament capable. That's a pretty good non-conference schedule.
All right, Jerry. Well, we thank you so much for your time. We're just going to get reservations for each of the next 4 weeks to talk to you. We will not do that. We try hard not to overstate or over.
Well, hopefully 4 weeks from now there'll still be a reason to talk to me.
That is true. If you're a Purdue fan, that is a true statement. It will be very interesting to see how this all plays out. Probably as interesting a tournament as we've seen in a long time. Jerry, thanks so much, and good luck in your travels and in your burning the midnight oil, etc. over the next few weeks. I'm sure that caffeine will come into it at some point in time as well.
I got more caffeine in my blood than I have blood.
There you go. All right, thanks again, Jerry. Brian, it will be interesting to see how this all plays out. You've been covering Purdue for a long time. This is really a little bit different than where the Boilermakers have been. I don't know what's different about it, but there's that feeling that you could go you could go to the Final Four, but maybe it's just a function of where teams are, the homogenous view of the entire slate of teams. It just seems different.
Yeah, I looked at Purdue in the preseason as a, quote, Sweet 16 team
Yeah.
with upside because they're going to be more matchup dependent than probably anybody in the country, and that remains true. Purdue's not the only team going into the NCAA tournament here in a couple of weeks with extreme volatility. I think you're going to see a lot of teams out there who can go to the Final Four or they can get beat in the first round. I don't think Purdue can get beat in the first round, barring a disastrous first round matchup, provided they have the right seed. But I think that Purdue is not the only school in the country going to this NCAA tournament as a complete wild card. I think that's going to be the story of the entire tournament, is that literally anything can happen. You say that every year, but this is one of those years where you kind of mean it because there's no dominant teams and there's almost everybody seems ripe for the upset.
All right. Well, we will look forward to discussing that till we're blue in the face, so to speak, on Golden Black Live and goldenblack.com. Brian will be writing that storyline, I'm certain, as we head to the tournament. All right. We want to thank our sponsors and Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, Triple X, Greg and Carrie Erzman have been great supporters of this show. And, of course, John Basham and the good folks at Basham Rentals, already renting for 2016-17. They're well into that, and then some. We appreciate all their support. Thanks also to Allie and Cammie and Gordon for all the things that you do for us to make sure this show airs. And, of course, we also have enjoyed having and DeAndre Smith on, also with Stacy Clarity. We'll look forward to hearing more about Purdue football next week, in addition to Purdue basketball heading into the NCAA tournament, or the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament as well. All right, we'll go away for a week now. We'll see you next Friday. It's 2 o'clock start time for our show, and look forward to seeing you, and have a great week on Golden Black Live.